Today is Monday, January 18th, 1988, and I am spending the afternoon with Gertrude Goodman. How are you today, Gertrude?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. What is your full name?
My full name in English is Gertrude, or Gert. My Russian name is Genya. My Yiddish name is Gittel, which I don't like, because I was never called that way. I was called always by an endearing name. Gittela or Gittinka, something like that, never Gittel. I also have, in Hebrew, in my Hebrew circles, I'm called Tova.
Today we're going to talk about some of the memories in your life. What were your parents' names?
My father's name in English in the United States was Samuel. His Hebrew name is Shmuel. My mother's name is Rivka Leah, or in the United States, Rivka Leah.
Can you tell me where they came from?
They came from Russia, from different places, each one of them, but both from the same section of Russia, and that's was called Ukraine.
Tell me a little bit about your parents and explain what they did and just different things that you remember about them.
My father was a Hasidic rabbi by profession. Not only by profession, also by learning. And he was known as a scholar. He was an unusual person, very learned, and he was really known as a person a man of wisdom, a philosopher, and steeped in learning. And also, not only in Hebrew learning, he was steeped in knowledge, but he was also, because of his wisdom, all the worldly things, all the temporary things that I don't think I mentioned that before. He was knowledgeable in everything. And that's why he was able to give advice and to reach people. They used to come to him for advice. He had many followers, and they'd come to him with their problems, and he was able to advise them right. And also, he was a great believer. He was very orthodox, and he believed that his thinking that the followers believed that his prayers will be heard quicker than theirs, and he, on the other hand, believed that he doesn't do anything for them without the help of God.
You also told me that he came from a generation of rabbis.
Yes.
Tell me more.
He came from a generation of rabbis. There was no even marriages, there was no mixture. There was from rabbinical families all the time. And our real name, the family name, was Murabenu, which means from our rabbinic family. Changed because we lived in Russia, and you had to have a Russian name. I don't know what the origin of Kaufman was. The name was Kaufman. But that was changed. And two brothers of my grandfather, each one was a different family name because of that was a reason. They used to take young men to the army, and in those days, that's years ago, they used to keep them for about 25 years, later on a little less, and no one wanted to go to the army. To stay out of the army, they were able to, by changing their names, only son was not taken. If there was an only son in the family, was not taken. That's why those two brothers changed, each one had a different name. One had Kaminka and one Kaufman. So they pretended that it was an only son.
Oh, that's
And they were
interesting.
not taken to the army because of that.
Do you remember your grandparents at all?
Very much.
Tell me about them.
I remember only one grandparent. Two, as a matter of fact, but close I was to one. And that's my father's father.
What was his name?
His name was David, and he was called by he was also well known, a very prominent Hasidic rabbi, and he was called Abdul Kaminka, and Abdul Meropal Rabbi or Kaminka.
What fond memories do you have of your grandfather?
My father was the only son, and he was very much loved. So we used to come, and my grandfather loved us very much, the children of his only son. We lived in a different place, my family. And we used to come to my grandfather, and he used to love us. We were little children. He'd keep us near him if we'd be eating, and he'd call, when I say us, I mean my sister Pearl and myself, because we were close in age. So we always were somehow together. My older sisters and my brother were much older than myself. I'm the youngest in a large family. So he would keep, if we'd eat his meal, he'd keep me near him on a little stool and treat me like a little kitten, and he'd give me like little pieces, like treating me like a little kitten, with love. And so I remember it all. And then whenever my mother at one time had to go with my father somewhere to a spa, he was very sick, and my older sister used to take us there and take care of me. And you want to know about my grandfather now. Yeah, he was a very, very known and also a Talmudist. His name was known far and wide. And
did you know at this time that your family was prestigious because they were rabbis? Did you feel special?
that not special. We were special. We were treated as special. But I didn't treat myself as special. As a matter of fact, I did not like to be special because people expected that is when we grew up to realize it. We were children, it didn't matter. My grandfather, for instance, treated us so nicely. He's very religious. He would make sure that there was a little, like a candy store. It was very hot in the summertime, and we would buy anything on Saturday or anything. Make up with that storekeeper that when we come on Saturday, they give us anything we want. But we didn't have to handle money or buy or anything.
Did they live with you? Did your grandfather live with you or
No,
nearby?
we lived in different, that's when we used to come to visit him.
I see.
And stay for quite a while with him. That's when
Do you have any memories
then-
of your grandmother?
well, actually, my grandfather, my father had a stepmother.
Mm-hmm.
The real mother, I understand, I was told, stayed with my father before she passed away. They were divorced. And so I wasn't even born. I think my mother was pregnant then when my grandmother died in our house. My mother was very good to her. My mother was good to everybody.
Let's talk about your mother now.
Okay.
And we're going to focus on a picture of your mother. And there are 4 people in this picture, and she's the one sitting in the center below. Tell me a little bit about your mother now.
My mother was a very unusual person. She was simple, but she had a great mind. She was known among those that knew her as a woman of wisdom. in those days they used to consider a man she was as wise as any man of wisdom. That's what they used to say. And in our house, I remember only love, and that's not so usual in a very Hasidic Orthodox family, because the women and the men, I'm not judging it because there were others like ours, but in my house there was love. My father instilled respect and love for mother. Mother was the queen. But at the same time, everything was separated. Men, women were separated in our family, in our house. But it was an unusual devotion between my father and my mother. My mother was born in a different city, also the same part, and also rabbis, but not a Hasidic rabbi, a rabbi like you know now, also a very learned man, but that had the responsibility of our shul and of a community, not wide like my father was a Hasidic rabbi. It's separate, it's different. That used to be called, a Hasidic rabbi used to be called Rebbe. And this is a rabbi like, you know, in every center. No? So, but also they came from an outstanding family, rabbinic family, and somewheres we were even related. Some was not closely related, my father and my mother, because it was all, intertwined somehow. They were related somewhere. They had some great-grandfathers, brothers or something, but really there was a relationship. And my grandfather respected and loved my mother, mm-hmm. and trusted her a lot because she's so knowledgeable. If we lived in a different city, he'd get sick. You wouldn't trust the stepmother with medications or something. You'd call my mother to come. That's all she used to take the whole family. Used to take us, we were little children, and come there. So
so they met.
Later on,
they met and they got married.
In those days, when they got married, I understand there was no such thing as meeting and falling in love or something like this. It's through somewhat be matched up. Mm-hmm. And they married very young. By the way, my mother also had a very business head on her shoulders, because aside from being a rabbi, my grandfather had a very big store, a textile store. And my mother, being very clever, she was managing it. So she was really, until the very end, she lived to a very old age. She was in the high 90s when she passed away. She really was knowledgeable in everything. She was a business lady.
She was ahead of her times.
Yeah, she was ahead of her time. And she was also known as she had help always, because it was a big household always, and we always have a synagogue in the house, and people used to come. And also holidays and all, everyone, poor people, were always welcome to come. And they used to say that my mother had rubber pots. No matter whoever came, she always had enough to feed them with.
And your mother had many children also.
Yes.
And you were the youngest?
I'm the youngest, so I only know the 6 children that we were left alive until the last couple of years. We're not all 6 alive. But I understand that she lost, I was told, that she lost some. They were even older than the older one. And then I don't know where in between, the one that passed away. And then I was also told that she had some miscarriages. But 6 children.
What kind of relationship did you have with your brothers and sisters?
Very close. And I did not have such close relationship with my oldest brother, because I was so much younger. I was a child when he left for the United States. He's the only one that left for the United States. He was the oldest, and it was my father and mother always had a hope that he's going to be, that's what used to be in the Hasidic families. The son would take the father's place in the long run. But he did not want to be a rabbi, but he had all the knowledge when he was a very young boy to be a rabbi. So he was sort of a little rebel. He also wanted to study Russian and know all about Western culture too, not only rabbinical.
You told me that you were very curious and very studious, and that you wanted very much to learn.
Oh, that's talking about myself, what you asked me about, not
Yes.
my...
Continue about yourself.
Okay. So with him,
Okay.
to finish, I couldn't, not until we came to the United States. Here we were very close, because I was big already and he was married already. All right, myself, what did your question?
You told me that you were very studious and really
Yes.
wanted to learn a lot.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
I remember myself since I was very, very young. I cannot state, it wouldn't be right for me to say I was 3 years or 4 years, because maybe 4.5, maybe 5, it would be right. But very, very young. The reason I remember that also is by the example that I can remember, that I had a favorite uncle, my mother's brother, and he used to come very often. She had other brothers and sisters, but he used to come. And he was talking to me like to a child, because evidently I had just lost my first tooth, because he was teasing me, saying, you're little toothless, or saying, imitating me that I lisp, because I couldn't speak well yet. So I know that I was and I remember it. So I know that I remember so very, very young. And I remember that I was always curious, and I always wanted to learn. And because I had older brothers and sisters, and when they were big already, and a teacher came into the house, I was crying. Why shouldn't I take lessons too? Why can't I learn? Although I was teaching myself too. I tried to imitate them, and I was self-taught to read and write before time. But I was crying. The teacher was a little child. He was humoring me. And then he said that okay, I'll give you a lesson too. I'll give you a lesson too. And
What kind of lessons were these?
Well, they were in Russian lessons. And so naturally for me would be how to read and write, but he didn't really teach me how to read and write, but he said, okay, I'll teach you a little poem. And that little poem stuck. Later on too, maybe I started in the very beginning, because I really was like to write poetry in the later years. So that little poem, I still partially remember. Most of it, I think.
Do you want to tell us any of it? Do you remember little bits and pieces?
I may remember it, and I may miss something. That's a Russian. You wouldn't understand it, but I'll say it. Дети, в школу собирайтесь. Петушок пропел давно. Поскорее одевайтесь. And the last line, I forgot it. I know what it was, that you will be too late for school. Something like that, but it rhymed.
So it's a little childhood poem.
What is that?
It was a little childhood poem.
Yes.
At this time, your family was very secure in the city that you were born. But we'll talk about now, at the end of World War I, when your father got a tip from the police that you should get out of town. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the history of your family at that point?
It was the war with Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the war, as the Germans succeeded in And we were, the place we lived was not far from the border. And the Tsar in Russia was not too kind to Jews and always distrusted them. And I think now when I think of it, they always thought and distrusted the Jews that they may side with the Germans. And my father found out that the police tipped him off that there was a list came in, a black list, and since my father was the most prominent person in the city, he was on the black list to be taken as a hostage. And this the head of the police, he promised through somebody that used to be in contact with him. He was someone, a citizen of the town that was representing the Jewish people in the town. So he was close with the police. And so that the head of the police promised him that when they'll get an order to carry out and take hostage, they will let my father know. And the order came, and we were let know that we have to leave town, that you'll be taken as a hostage. We had to leave just then. We didn't know just tomorrow or whenever they'll come suddenly to arrest him. So where should we go? And there were very abnormal times. There was no passenger trains, nothing. Where we go all of a sudden? Well, my father realized he had a very close friend. His name was Gertrude Goodman. That was my father-in-law. And he had a chemical factory. And he was known. It was a known business. As a matter of fact, his picture was like a Heinz Plus, because he had his own formula for all the certain vinegars, essence of it. So, and he had branches. So he had a branch in our town. He didn't live there, but he was a very close friend of my father, a follower and a close friend. And I knew him too, by the way. May I mention, while I'm talking, that I loved that man. He was such a lovely person. And whenever he used to come to visit my father, he used to come also with sharing with my father and take advice and business and all that. And he was treated very nicely in our house. I would be around him all the time, and he would pat me on the back as a little girl on my head, and he'd say, "I have a little girl just like you," because my sister-in-law, Ruth, my husband's sister, is the same age as I. She's 3 weeks younger, but the same age. So I used to love him very much. Now, his son, who was later my husband, he was very capable and very bright. And he was at that time a very young fellow. He was about 16 years old. So, and he was in an out-of-town school, not in the same town where they lived. But during the time of vacation, a school vacation, the summertime, he'd help his father in the business. So, as young as he was. And they had a branch on the railroad station in our town, because they used to load carloads. I mean, they used to send out carloads all over Russia. So it was during that summer, he was there, right, at the railroad station, and he had all connections. He was connections with the service people at the railroad station. So my father thought that he may be influential with those people to get us out, no matter whether it's a freight train or anything, but to get us out to go someplace. So he called him. He was a very good-looking boy, and later a very handsome man. And And I was 6 years younger than my husband. So naturally, at that age, it means an awful lot. Later on, 6 years didn't mean anything. But at that age, it was me. But as a child, I remember, I just fell in love with that. He's so handsome. He's such a nice young boy. He didn't even look at me at that time. He came. My father asked him to come over. He has to talk to him about something, and he came. And I just saw him. That's all. Well, he was influential, and he did help us out a great deal. We got to the station. We could take along only a few things, whatever my mother saw that she could take along, we did. And of course, my father also took a Torah along with him, put it in some kind of a box. And we came to the railroad station, and we stayed there for overnight, the whole day, the whole night, and there were no trains going anyplace. Finally, and he was up with us, by the way, that Sal Goodman, that was, at that time in Russia he was called Syama. And he was up with us the whole night. Finally he was let know that they expect a train passing by and going the parts, they told us what part of Russia they were aiming. And now he came to my father and asked where they want to go. He didn't know where to go, where they should give him permission to go. Well, finally they decided on a city, and that was far away. The name of the city was Kremenchuk. It was across the Dnieper, the river Dnieper. And that was far away from the front. They used to train the armies, the soldiers there. So, and my father also, when he heard that it could pass that city, that might be a very suitable city. There was also a Jewish community there. So that's where we were aiming for, and that's where we went to. To get on that train was also an experience. It was not a good element of people on there. And I even remember one of my oldest sister, whose husband was also a rabbi, and he was killed in a pogrom, and she had 2 little children. One was an infant, and there was one of the people that I guess were not so kind. They tried not to let her on. They pushed her she nearly fell with the child in her arm. Well, we got on the train. We got to Kremenchuk. And that's where we settled. My father made friends all over. It took no time, and we had many, many friends. And by the way, there were a lot of refugees there from other places too, that they had to run away for different reasons, pogroms or whatever, or near the front generally, because it was dangerous there to live. So, in that city, and concerning my childhood that you wanted to know so much, of being very studious, I wanted to study. I always wanted to go to school. And home in the little town, there was only a preschool, and then you would enter the gymnasium after you got to. But they were attending school on Saturday and Shabbat, and my father wouldn't hear of it, so I couldn't go to school. But I always studied. I did myself, and then I insisted. I cried to get my education. That was, I was a child yet, and then it wasn't anymore a baby when I'm talking about before we left. So a teacher was coming in, and then I used to go to the library. I read books way ahead of my time. But anyway, in Kremenchuk, there was a gymnasium, which was only one of its kind. I think there were 2. Maybe there were 3. I only knew there were 2 gymnasiums. The head of the gymnasium were Jewish, because Jews were not allowed to be principal of schools or anything. And these people were brave enough to keep on struggling and struggling, and they certainly had all the education and the knowledge to be, but they couldn't get it. These two gymnasia, one was in Odessa and one in Kremenchuk. And the principal was a Jewish woman. And the husband especially was a very devout Zionist. So that's where I started my Hebrews too. I like to know everything. So I insisted I want to go to gymnasium. Here they do not attend on Shabbat. And so we did, my sister and I, the one that we were always close. She was only 2 years older than I. And my husband, that is Saul Goodman, Shama Goodman at that time, occasionally, it happened once, by the way, that his father, I think I mentioned that, saved my life. He tried to evacuate his business. There was no place to remain there. So he figured that this would be the right place. First of all, my father was there, and there was a growing feeling between them. And then, so first he sent his son. He was at that time already a little older, to Kremenchuk to see whether it's suitable to evacuate the factories and all to Kremenchuk. And they found it was possible. And the father came once when I was still a very little girl, because we had just come there. And I was very, very sick. I had scarlet fever, I remember. And I was so sick that I couldn't even talk. Maybe it was a crisis of the... And my father was standing over me, asking me if he didn't know what my life, of my expiring. I couldn't answer. I couldn't hear. I remember it. I could hear him ask me, pitifully, asking me, answer me. And I couldn't answer. At that time, Gedalia Goodman, his name was Gedalia. Gedalia Goodman came. First of all, he also saved me, because he was helping my father, was actually carrying me with his arms. And I needed a doctor in the middle of the night. He ran to bring a doctor to spare my father. And at the same time, and a few things, he took me, carried me around like his own. And then he also brought news from the other side, because there were no connections, real direct connection between us and the place where we lived when we ran away from. He brought news to my father to be careful, to know what's expecting him. That he heard that the one that tipped off my father, that was in between the information between the police and him, he was arrested. And my father's name was somewhere on a card or somewhere, was found in his pocket. And in Russia it was very dangerous at that time. It was a Cheka at that time. They would come in the middle of the night, pick up someone from the house, and you wouldn't even know what it is for, or what, and arrest the person, and then the family didn't know where he was. So he told my father that this happened, and they may come here and they may question him. Well, so that was a good thing too, that we knew about it, but it didn't happen. They did not come to my father. Now, what is the next question?
You told me the Bolshevik Revolution.
My husband, you wanted another connection as to about myself as to this. My Shama Goodman later was my husband later, and he always reminded me, the way he remembered me was as a very studious little girl. Every time he'd come to visit us, and he did, if he was somewhere near in the town, because he traveled a lot. He traveled from his father's business, and he also traveled a lot generally. And he was a very lively and worldly fellow. And he used to talk to my oldest sister. To me, he was just teasing me, talking to me like a child. And he said, you always remembers me as a studious little girl. If you'd come, at the picture of me sitting somewhere either on the stairs or with a book, and I had very beautiful hair with long braids. That's the way he remembered me. I myself remember being in love with my husband ever since I was a child. Every time he would come, if he'd leave, I'd cry to myself. I'd cry that he'd leave. I miss him. And then he was I think 18 years old then, when one of my oldest sisters married. She got married in Kremenchuk. And he was the only one that happened to be just then visiting. And he was the only one at the wedding. And he was a young fellow, and he was a volunteer. At that time he was going to volunteer to the army, because they would have taken him anyway. And as a volunteer and being a student, he was have more. Maybe they wouldn't send him to fight at the front. But anyway, from there he went to the army as a volunteer. So, and when he left, he was talking to the young people there. My brother-in-law was he was much older even than my sister, than myself, positively. So he had a sister. It's a grown-up girl. She was a college girl. So he naturally was talking to her, not to me. I was watching him all the time. And then she told me later that she got a postcard from him. They were corresponding. And I remember how I suffered as a child. I was thinking to myself, oh, that's the only type, the only one that I would like to marry when I grow up, was Gertrude Goodman. And Gertrude Goodman positively will be married then. He's so much older than I. Now I'm a little girl. Yeah, well, that, all right. This is that I remember all the time. When we came to, then you want me to continue about my
I would like to
about
talk
my
about
husband.
your family. When
My husband, how I met him later? No.
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Talk about your family when they left Kremenchuk and returned home, but you stayed there with your sister because you wanted to continue school.
Then the revolution started.
Mm-hmm.
And not that it was so good for in any place, for especially for rich people. And it happens that my sister was married in Kremenchuk. He was from a very wealthy family, and they suffered a lot at the beginning. Everything was confiscated. They were chased out of their house and so on. But anyway, after a while, the Bolsheviks were not successful in every place, and the city administration, different cities, were changing power, and either the Germans would come in. At that time, they were not the Germans. At that time, bands would come in, bandits, and pogroms and all. There was a separation, but there, in the old part of the country where we lived before, there was Germans would come in. And it was a separation between, since Kremenchuk was far away from there, separated for 2 years, that we did not have any connection with our parents. We didn't know whether they are alive, because there were pogroms all over, either here or there or different times. And as a matter of fact, during that time, my brother-in-law was killed. And we didn't know who was alive and who was not alive. After 2 years, a certain time, we received a postcard. Somehow there was some connection. There was one government, and we got a postcard from home, because my sister was there, and when they found out, they wrote some, and it did come. And they told us that who was alive and who was not alive. And they also told us about Gertrude Goodman, who was the father of Saul Goodman, that he passed away. That was just information, home news. Now my sister and I decided that we are going home. We'll try. There was no connection. There were no railroads, no trains running back and forth that you could come to the station and go wherever you want. that we'll try. We'll try to get on some kind of a train that goes in that direction. And we were very much discouraged by my sister and her husband, also by her in-laws. We were very close, but we stayed there. We attended gymnasium. And by the way, before that, while we were in gymnasium, after we ran away from there, we used to come home for the summer. My parents were returned home. I don't think I told you that. After several years being in Kremenchuk, and there was a chance to return home, my parents returned home to their old home. Well, we wanted to continue our education, and since my sister lived there, she got married there, we remained. And in the summertime we would come on vacation home, and then we'd get back to gymnasium. And all of a sudden we were separated, but I wouldn't repeat myself. And after 2 years, about 2 years, we realized that maybe we have a chance. But we wouldn't listen. My sister and I decided. They didn't let us discourage us because it was very dangerous, especially for 2 young girls. It was not normal times. We said we are going. We wanted to be with our parents and the rest of the family. We came to the station and we stayed there. I don't remember exactly. It was a day and a half or more than a whole day. I know the night too. And we had to make up a little lie. We said that we were going to be a teacher as kursiski, they call them college students. There was a college there, and we are going there on the way. And they actually, we called ourselves red students. Everything Bolsheviks were red. So as we are going to that college. And finally, we somehow succeeded in someone that sympathized with us and let us know that there was a train coming, very soon coming to the station, that's on the way to the front, which was not far from us. It was in that direction, going that direction. Doctors and nurses, and they had different supplies for to pick up soldiers there and to bring them food, everything like that. And we may be able to get on. And we did. We just got on without any documents, without any permissions, but they let us get on. And we were all the time very much afraid that they'll find us out. Well, in those days, that train, and like other trains that did go, was not really for regular passengers. They would stop sometimes in a station and stand there for 2 days. We didn't know when they're going to leave, whether we ever going to get to the destination. So at one station, they stopped, and that was Kazakin, I remember. That was not too far from us already. It was close to the destination. And they stood there for about a day. At some stations they missed altogether. They didn't stop at every station. But when they did stop, you didn't know when they were going to leave. And all the doctors, the nurses, everyone left the train because on the station, near the station, there was a park. And it was really, they used to call it, it's of all the officers and from the army. They had an army band there, and there was a concert. So everyone went to that concert. The train wasn't leaving. And they knew that, they did know that it's not leaving. And my sister and I decided, we're not going to remain on the train. They all go, we'll follow. We'll go to the concert too. And we did. But to come back to the train, we found we shouldn't have been there, because we didn't have any documents to show. And they were checking everyone. And when it came to us, they stopped us. Don't go. We don't belong to the train. But we would have been lost, actually. They would have arrested us. I don't know what would have happened to us. But there's some from the officers that knew us already from the train, because we were on there quite a while. It took much longer than was necessary. So he came over to rescue us, says that we belong on the train. We are on the train, and they let us through. That was one danger. Then we came closer, and we got closer to Berditchev. We had to pass. Our place was further than Berditchev. And in Berditchev, they were supposed to, according to the distance, we realized that train is going to stop there in the middle of the night. So the people, the officers, the nurses and all, knowing where we are going, and so they knew that we were talking, we became friendly with the people. And they knew that we know the places there and all. They didn't. No one knew where Berditchev was. But so they arranged that, and they all went to sleep. But it wasn't Berditchev. It was supposed to come in the middle of the night. So they said to us that we should watch. They're supposed to stop in Berditchev to fill in to get some food supplies for that was a big city. So we should wake them. So they will tell the motormen to stop because they was getting these orders. So we said, okay, we will. And my sister and I decided that we are not going to do it. No matter what. We didn't know what punishment we were going to get if they find out that we did not. And then we thought, look, what can they do to us? After all, suppose we'll tell them what we overslept. We didn't notice it. Well, we did know. We knew where it was coming to Berditchev. The reason was that we were afraid. Not knowing it the way it was, we didn't know where that train was going to reach. All the time, we were never sure that we'll reach our station. But I wouldn't change their mind and divert the train, because a lot of trains were they diverted going back. It was not sure. Especially, it was towards the end of the week. And we would have come there, and that was already Thursday night. And if we would have come even home, but they come on Saturday to my father's house, we couldn't do it. So we will not be able to get home. So that was the reason that we could not. We were just shivering if they'll stop, and they may stay for 1 day and then leave, and just on Saturday we'll come in. So we succeeded. It passed Berditchev, and we took us. We could catch our breath, and then when they got up, I don't think they even knew. Well, anyway, it was and we reached finally. We passed Berditchev, and we reached on Friday afternoon. We reached our town, and that's where we came home. My parents, the whole family, they did not expect us. This was a complete surprise to them. So you can just imagine what a welcome we got. Yes. So that was.
Did you stay home for a while at that point?
Not too long a time. This happened to be before holidays, I remember. And during the holidays, during that time, they stayed home. It was a short time, meaning maybe a few months. There were so many things happened. Germans came in, and they used to abuse the young people. We used to hide. They used to take just to laugh. I was just reading a book, by the way, and I came across those incidents that they just plain mockery. They to put you to shame. They take especially the young people. We used to hide. We had a hiding place, by the way, in our house, behind a break front. There was a door to another room that could be hidden, and we used to hide every time we'd see a soldier come. And there was also a Jewish patrol. They organized that to watch for either bandits came to rob the city in the upper pogrom, or the Germans would approach. So they were watching. And the Germans came in the middle of the day. They just come to the house and look for young people to take them to work. They did not kill them. And I remember once my sister and I, somehow they found us. They came in unexpectedly or something. And we and a few others, we were not the only ones, and the other young people, going all through the center of the city to someplace to work. The work was peeling potatoes, things like this, beets and like this. And they was just, while we were doing it, they were teasing and joking and make us feel bad. But we knew how to keep quiet and disregard. And so this was not harmful, but it was bad. We used to be afraid of that. But then pogroms started. They had pogroms before too, like one pogrom at my brother-in-law who was on the way to visit his parents, who were also separated for a while. They lived with my parents, my sister and husband. And he was attacked on the way, and then when he reached his parents' home, he couldn't come back to my sister, to our house. And there, in this house, he was killed by bandits came in. They were all hidden, the whole family. He and his brothers and his father. And they found him and they found the father. He was killed and the father was killed. But that's a side story. Now,
tell me about the postmaster who took you in.
All right. So there, the pogroms, take one pogrom, was one kind of a band came in, and it took a day or so. And they would disappear. They would rob and kill and do whatever they want, and then they would leave town. So we had several like this. And one time, I remember hiding in a synagogue. They thought that in a synagogue, they will not, because they also want to rob the houses, If you're in an empty house, let them rob. But we were all together in the synagogue. And my father covered us, my sister, myself, with a talib, the pray in the prayer shawl, So because girls didn't belong there on the shul. And they come in, and they did come in, and you can just imagine how fearful we were all. Somehow we survived there. A lot of people were killed that day. After that, for a short time it was quiet, and then Cossacks came in from Caucasia. They were known as killers, and they were very good horseback riders. And that was the real pogrom. At that time, the postmaster, who respected my father very much, of course not Jewish people, and they took in the whole family to shelter us, and they came only to Jewish houses, and they were Gentile, and they took us in to hide us from we were hidden there, but as young girls, when they actually came, the pogrom started, they took letters down. There was some kind of a pig pen, something. They kept the pigs there, pigsty, pig pen, I don't know what they called it. They let us there, to hide there. They come in even to the house because they suspected sometimes that Jews were hidden so they would sometimes come and look. So to make sure, we were there. And it was terrible. We used to hear the hoofs of the horses, the Cossacks, running, and they were killing, they were robbing. It was the worst ever that I can remember. I remember other pogroms too that we were survived, but this was the worst. And then we heard scream of an old man, and my sister and I it was through a peephole we were able to look. We weren't seen. We saw this these streets were empty because everyone was hiding someplace, and they found them. They killed plenty, but they were trying to hide in the houses. Nobody was on the street. They must have found this man. I don't know what happened, that he was running. He was alone in the street running. That I remember this old man with the beard. I can just see the picture. I can just remember his voice. It remained with me. The voice of him screaming, and they were running with the horses after him. After that was quiet, and we did not see him anymore through the peephole. We heard the following day after they cleared out the city, and we came out of our hiding places. We heard this one was killed, this one, and we heard that that man was killed. And I knew just when his voice stopped. Well, this is one. After that, really half or maybe the whole Jewish population wanted to leave because they were coming one after another. So they were called by different names. This was Petlura, this was the Nikin was the Cossacks, by different names. They're coming every time. Well, anyway, we decided we must leave, but how should we leave? How can we leave? The Jews assembled and they tried to decide what to do. Well, they were the only way my father and the family could leave is by paying a lot of money, and other Jewish people too, to peasants that had horses and wagons that they used for their fields, to plow the fields and stack hay, so anyway, that's some of them wanted to do. They got a lot of money, and they got money, the Tsarist money, not the money that was Bolshevik money through a revolution at that time. And that was very expensive. That was very dear. And if you pay with that, that's what they wanted. And my father had quite a bit of it, and other people that had. We paid a lot, and they made a deal with the peasants to take us out of there. And so we left the town on a wagon. On wagons, we put on as much as we could, take along some things, and the rest we left. And we went out of town like a gypsy caravan, one wagon after another, and we were going from town to town, and sometimes stop over and sleep over there. They had to get food for to feed the horses and so, and give them a rest. And in ourselves, my father had friends in every town where we passed. One of them we had relatives. And until we came to, the first stop was Tarnopol. It was Poland at that time. And then we went from there to Lvov. At one time Lvov was Austria, then it became Poland. But anyway, we found relatives there in Tarnopol too, and also very prominent Jews there that had big homes and all. So they gave us an apartment and all. We stayed until we reached Warsaw. That's where we were on the way to United States. Before we left yet, after the pogrom, we got a letter from my brother. At that time just came through. Otherwise, for the longest time, we were not connected with my brother at all in the United States. And he heard what was doing there, and he encouraged us to leave the same way, because my father would have never thought of going to the United States. The United States was not a place where we was, in those days. Now there were Orthodox people here, there were all kinds of people here. But in those days, only the poor people that couldn't live, they were really poor, and they knew that in America you can make a living. They would leave their families, go to the United States, and after they worked out, they made a living, they'd get their families to here. Those were the old refugees. My brother did not go for that purpose to the United States. He went because it was against. He wanted to study, and he did study in Russia too. But he knew he will not reach his goal to be a professional or something, and he did not want to hurt my parents, and he did not want to be a rabbi. So he went to the United States. So that's why he happened to be here. And here he was college graduate. He was a doctor of pharmacy. And he encouraged. He said, "I'll send you papers." And my father had many friends here, followers, those that I'm telling you that used to leave Russia in order to make a living for their family. So they were here and they knew father before they left. So you had to, at that time, there was a limited number of refugees that they let in the United States. They didn't let in everyone. And if you get documents, some wives from their husbands, children, their parents, and also you had to prove to be guaranteed that we were not going to be a burden to the government. So my brother and also all these friends sent out papers to my father. So we stayed in Warsaw, in Poland, 1 year. By the time that we got all the papers and the necessary thing to go. In Warsaw we spent quite a year, and we had relatives there and many, many friends. And then we came here through Belgium, through Antwerp. That's where we took our...
Gertrude, at this point, I would like to just focus on the pictures of you when you were younger, and we will continue talking when you came to the United States. What was the name of the ship that you came over on?
I think the name was La France.
How long did it take to get here?
A week.
And we're now focusing on a picture, and you are the girl on the left. Now, you came into Ellis Island. What was it like to see the Statue of Liberty?
It was a terrific excitement. Everyone ran to see that statue. That meant that we are reaching the United States. And when we came there, we did not remain there. There was a lot of quarantine, you know. Mm-hmm. And we did not have to go through that. We had many people waiting for my father's arrival here, and so we did not have to go through all this. And we went straight to New York. Some people had to stay on the island for a while.
And it was at this point that you went to Brooklyn on Henry Street?
No, Henry Street was in New York. We went first to Brooklyn, to East New York.
Okay.
And I think we lived there for less than a year. And we had there's a lot of memories of that, the few months there too. There was a two-family house. We have a large apartment from my sisters, by the way, and the oldest one with the two children, who was a widow at that time. Her husband was killed, and then my another sister who was married also came with us. The one that we stayed with in Kremenchuk remained there for a while. My father brought her out later with her family. But my father supported them all. We came together here. And so we had a large apartment. And then in no time, my father and the whole family, we moved to New York. That was Henry Street.
Did your mother become Americanized when she came over from Russia?
Americanized, and only in a way that she learned the life of the American, but she did not acquire the English language well. She spoke Yiddish.
What was the personality of your parents at this time? Were they joyful to be here in America?
They never thought of coming here, but once they were here, we really ran away from. We saved our lives that way, and then he was welcomed by so many by so many friends that the papers had written about the Miropolo rabbi came in, and they came friends from all over, from Chicago, from Boston. They once asked him to come, invited him to come to Boston, and there was all the New York papers for what a following he had there when he came. So they felt happy here.
Now your aim was to get a very good education, and your father encouraged you to do this, even though you were a woman.
Well, once we were already in gymnasium, and we did not have to break the Shabbat laws and all that. Then he was encouraging. It was not discouraged, but I had to convince. I had to fight to get the education, because Russian was not that important to them. But in gymnasium, by the way, he was the head of the husband of the principal, the woman principal, and he was a Zionist, and he was the only one that insisted, because he had a chance, that he had a Hebrew class there. And I was very interested, and I was very anxious to know. And he found that out, because he had not too many students were interested in it, and he had to make sure that they learn. And he had 2 children. He was the only one that spoke Hebrew with his children. He had a library, and he would send me, at that time it was elementary, and now I still continue until these days to study, and it's quite advanced. But at that time, little books to read, he would give me from his library. He saw that I'm anxious to know. And I also belonged there, by the way, to, as young as I was, I belonged to, there was a Maccabi club. And there were young Zionists, like scouts. There were scouts in this, exactly like scout. This is the way they would do it. And we had, we belonged to that too. There we did a lot of gymnastics.
Let's talk about when you went to Washington Irving High School in New York.
Right. When I came here, I was mostly interested to continue my education here and to become Americanized. I just didn't want to look at I reread the literature at the same thing that I read in Russian, in English. And by the way, I learned English very fast. In a short time, I spoke it. But I wanted to know it well, not just to pick it up in the street. In gymnasium we studied French and German and Hebrew. That was the side language. So I was able to quickly learn it. And then I left the Russian language. I didn't even want to speak a word of it, only to learn. I even wanted to, when I was angry with my brother that he didn't let me, because we looked up to him. He was Americanized, and to guide us with education, where to go, what schools. And I said, I would like to go into an elementary. I was much higher than they, and I'll go with little children, and I'm already a big girl. So they laugh at me, but I will acquire the English language, the native, the children that are born here, and I will not have, I'll lose my Russian accent. And but of course he didn't think it was right. So first, for a short while, I was attending a private school, preparatory school there at that time. And then, so I would be able to get in to high school, which was lower than my knowledge was. But this is what I wanted. So there I acquired more the spoken language, and I left that school to go to Washington Irving. I also sent away my papers to Albany from gymnasium to evaluate and to give me some credit. They gave me less than I deserved, but they gave me credit for it. So I belonged in the high school. So when I came to high school, the principal of high school was not friendly. She said, you come here, refugees, and our children spend 8 years before they get into high school. And you come here and you're only here a short time and you already want to be in high school. So I just defended myself. I said, look, those children are the lucky ones that were born in the United States. It was not my choice to be born in Russia. I was in Russia, but I spent the same time studying. So the knowledge I had, I was just not lucky to be in America to go through the 8 years here. But I spent the 8 years there in that learning. So she said, you know, for such a short time, she sort of changed. She said, for being here such a short time, you speak pretty well English. You speak English pretty well. So she says, okay, but I'll give you a test. You'll have a written test and an oral test. She said, fine. Well, I passed the test and I continued in Washington Irving High School.
What did you want to be when you grew up? Did you know at this point? At
first, primarily, I just wanted education. I wanted to work. So first I started even before that school. We had a friend, a high school teacher. So he was coming in and we started just literature and all that. And then I continued. I think I aimed for teaching. I was interested in, by the way, I was an ardent reader all my life. I was even encouraging my children later on to become, since they were children, a love for reading. And they are good readers to this day, I think. So, and then I think maybe a thought came out, and I wanted to work. I wanted to be among American people. I saw American young girls work, and I've never worked in my life before. And my parents then, of course, go to college, and they did not encourage me to work. But until I reach a if I have a specialized field, I think my mind was to teach. But at first, just to go to work, to be with American people, American young people. I had friends already here that I saw young girls and boys, and they were all working, you know.
Your life with Saul was intertwined throughout Russia, and later you met him again in the United States.
Yes.
Tell me about your future husband, Saul.
Yeah. So part of it I already told you, that
yes.
He was on my mind all the time. But he later on, when I was married already, he used to tell me that that's the way he remembers me, so for a little girl. So, but we here, I remembering him as a big boy, you know, and always thinking about him, and we all value that the Goodman family friendship very much. And we were discussing, so where could Syoma Goodman be as a young fellow, and the way we knew the conditions of Russia, that many of the young people left Russia, and he's brave enough to, he probably left too. He must be someplace. We didn't know exactly, United States or Israel, but he is somewhere. But we didn't know anything about him for a long, long time.
We are showing a picture of Saul now as a younger man while you're talking about him.
Okay. Soon, by a sheer coincidence, that soon after we were talking about him, I went down to pick up the mail, and one envelope, just the handwriting, hit my eye, because he had a similar handwriting to his father's, and sometimes he himself would write to my father, and it was a distinct handwriting that he had. I said, "Oh, that's a Goodman handwriting. That looks like Syoma Goodman's handwriting." And the letter was written to my father. He saw my father's name in an English paper. And he wasn't sure that this is they settled. They came the same year. Became 1921. They came the same year, actually, just a difference in a few months. And when he came here, when he saw my father's name, he couldn't imagine that this. He wasn't sure that this is the cow from the family that he knew so well, and he was such, and his father was such good friends, and he liked my father very much. So he wrote this letter to my father. My father, of course, answered the letter, and he, at that time, he, by the way, was a very bright person, and he and his sister Ruth acquired the language very, very quickly. And he had already an important job there. Through the family, he was brought out from Russia. He was a medical student there already when he left, and he wanted to leave Russia. They left through Romania. We came through Belgium. They came through Romania, and they had to illegally cross a certain border, which was very dangerous to cross. And there was some when they, in the middle of the night, they were coming down through mountain, a steep mountain, and there was a patrol there, and there were on this side the Romanian strong peasants that they used to dare to take a little boat, and they, from the other side they had also representatives, and they would light a match and let these people know that a patrol is going the other way, and disappeared. That's what took. It was a short way to go by through, cross the water. It was not such. I imagine so, but by the time the patrol will turn back, they came over. But it was very hard for the people to come down those big mountains to the boat. It was not just a place where boats stopped. So it was a very dangerous place to come. And he stopped and he crossed that. And by the way, he was a very good-natured, very humane person. He was telling me that he saw he was already down to the boat, but he saw a woman with a child. And it was a whole group of people going. And she couldn't make it. She was falling back, and he endangered his life going back to help that woman with the child. And they're already in Romania. Actually, if he had his choice, he might have gone to at that time, Palestine. It was not the Jewish state yet. But they had relatives in Washington, and they sent a man, and sent money. By the way, my husband came with money some hidden on him. But the same people that brought him over, that they paid him a lot of money to bring him and other people over, they were really bandits. They were strong guys. They beat him up. They robbed him. I guess others too, took the money away. Well, anyway, this is just an incident. And then, this is what he told me about. There are a lot of other stories. He went through an awful lot. Do you want me to tell about my husband or my meeting yet?
I would like you to go on to when you again met him from Washington, and he sent a letter to your house.
Right. So we got this letter, and this day, by the time I'll get back to where he came from to America. But when he wrote this letter, and he got the letter back, so he wanted to come to visit my father and the family. Not thinking about me. Me remembered only a little child. And but I was a big girl already then. And he had already a position there. You couldn't just leave any time. So on Sundays, there used to be they settled in Washington. The whole family was in Washington. So there were excursions. They'd come very early in the morning and stay the whole day, and then return with the same train to Washington. So he took a day to come to see the family. And I was the one to open the door to him. And that was really love from first sight. That from then on, there was a two-sided, not only me loving him since I was a child, but he met me as a big girl. He told me about it later. He did not, didn't tell him that I loved him so much, he didn't tell me. But he started to come much more often for on the excursion. And then his sister, Ruth, came before him. He had the job there. And they had some cousins here. So she came here. He wrote to me that his sister Ruth is coming here to meet her and all. So he had, after when his sister Ruth was here already, and I became very friendly with her. Until this day, we are very, very close. So he had another excuse. First of all, he was really coming to see his sister, and he had an excuse to come more often and make sure that we spent most of the day together. Then he had great possibilities in Washington, because, as I tell you, he was very bright, and he spoke French, and he learned the Romanian language very well while they spent quite a while in Romania, because he wouldn't leave Romania until he gets his sister out to come with him to America. And they also had a brother whom they couldn't, when I say they, I mean his sister and he, couldn't convince the brother to leave Russia. He was connected. He was a young fellow. He was younger than my husband, and he was in the Red Army, and he did not want to leave Russia. And my husband there, he was telling me how many times he risked his life to save his brother and convince him. First he took him, he was in Odessa at that time studying. He talked him to study. They left. My husband lost his mother very young. He wasn't even 13 years old. 13 years of a young Jewish boy's bar mitzvah. He was 12 years old a year before. She was only 32 years old. And they had, by the way, you see by the picture, a beautiful mother. She was known as a beauty. So he went through all that, and he had to leave his brother. But his sister, he knew will follow. He made up with her. And so they stayed for quite a while in Romania. During that time, he learned the language very well. So he spoke all these languages. So, and they had connections in Washington. He was admired for acquiring the language so quickly and knowing the other languages. They were connected with a certain attorney through the family, I guess. And she was an influential person. Her husband was someone with the government in Washington. And so they advised them a lot. And she wanted him to go to the diplomatic corps. He did not want to continue medicine. She did not want his family did want to finance his education. And then he paid back. He paid back all the other expenses that they sent out for him. They sent a person out, a relative out to Romania with money and documents to bring them. So, but he did not want. He wanted to be self-sufficient, and he changed his profession because it would take too long and too much money till he became. But he wanted to be where I was in New York. Not saying it to me, but he told me later. And so he was he had all good prospects in Washington by the firm that he was a manager there. Also, a very good future promised him. Here he only had to come and look for a job, but he came to New York, and since then, I was still in high school, and then he started college here. He had his college education, but he had to get his degree here. And here he became a CPA, and then after he became a CPA, he went to law. And
Gertrude, you were 19 and he was 24 when you got married. Would you
Right.
tell me a little bit about your wedding, please?
Yeah.
And at this
Well,
point,
after that, by the way,
we're going to focus on your in-laws.
we did not tell each other.
We're going to focus on your in-laws now, the picture of them.
But you wanted to know how the
Continue
our meeting
about the
got
wedding.
married. Yeah. Okay.
About the wedding.
So, all right. We did not, for a while, when he was in Washington, we did not tell each other that we love each other. But we were corresponding. And he used to come very often. He came for a weekend. We were in Atlantic City. He came for a weekend. He took my picture just jokingly, took it away, and then I was later told that the people that he stayed with in Washington, that they knew that the rabbi's daughter is in love with, because my picture was always on his desk. I didn't know at that time. But anyway, when he came to New York, then we knew we loved each other, and naturally he also wanted to marry me. And I said, I cannot marry you, because my sister Pearl is not married. And in our family, they would not allow the younger one to get married before the other. In my house, he could come because he was a friend. Young men were not allowed to come to young girls in my house. But I remember we used to come in the house. We only played chess, but we used to really meet. He used to meet me in the high school, and we used to meet in my sister's house, where she lived separately. Then there we were lovers, but in the house we were playing just chess. We were good chess players. I was a good chess player since I was a kid. Now you want me to
I would like you to talk about your wedding ceremony, please.
Yeah. Now, luckily, so my husband said that he is willing to wait for me if it takes 5 years, 6 years, no matter how long, until my sister will get married. If he has to wait for me, he'll wait. Luckily for us, my sister met her husband, and after 6 months after they were married, we were married. We got engaged right away as soon as they got engaged. So and I was the youngest in the family, and they made a big wedding, my parents. And a Hasidic wedding is something different than the usual wedding. And they call them Hasidim, the followers of a Hasidic rabbi, came from all over, from Boston, from Philadelphia, from Chicago, from all over. And there were so many people invited, and so many people came. There were police watching, and people were standing outside the wedding hall. At that time, they downstairs of our house was a wedding hall. It was there wasn't a wedding hall large enough to keep to hold so many people. And by the way, we were married outside under the open skies. And it was bitter cold, and it was in December, and it was so cold. And the chuppah, the wedding ceremony was outside. Of course, we had to I remember having a special white cape with urban color, and police had to make place for us to walk through to the ceremony, because people wanted to see the bride and groom. The bride and groom were not allowed to see each other a week before the wedding. They weren't allowed to see each other. Well, we did. Secretly, we saw each other a day before the wedding. And then there was one tradition that before we start the ceremony, that the bride sits on a chair, and covered up, face is covered up, and the groom comes close, brought to the bride, and picks up the veil. And I will never forget a meeting of our eyes at that moment. This is something in my life that I'll never forget. And from then on, then the ceremony started. And as I say, it was so crowded. It was so crowded that I myself did not enjoy really my wedding. But the others did. It was a terrific feast after. And there were police watching outside and inside. Outside, because I think the whole of the east side of New York was through the windows they wanted to see. Inside, the people that were there wanted to see the bride and the groom. So anyway, this was the wedding. After the wedding, we did not go on any honeymoon because he had too important a position. He managed a big firm, and they just wouldn't let him get away then. And but we made up for it later.
You and Saul had 3 children, George, David, and Adelaide. Can you tell me a little bit about your children when they were young?
My children were a gift from heaven. The first one, of course, was precious. I must refer to my husband's nature, to his character. He was an extremely devoted and loving person. He was a wonderful, wonderful husband, an extremely devoted father, devoted brother, and he was good. He was good to human. He was a very humane person. He was good to everybody. He was very good, and he was the type that could show love. You know, some people love deeply, but he had feelings, felt so deeply, and he could express it. He just showered love wherever he went. And really, until this day, I don't meet a person. He was a popular man. And he was very popular in the community. He was active all over. As busy a lawyer as he was.
At this time, he went and became a lawyer, correct?
So he was with a very big firm, and they wanted him, and he managed it. He built up to a very big business, and they wanted him as a partner because they knew that that's what they gave him a chance to study. He became a CPA also while he was working, and we had children already then. And I was always supportive in these things, in education and all this. So he was doing all that. And they, on the other hand, the firm allowed him to do it, to take his time for that, because they were afraid they'd lose him. They needed him. So he was able to do it. Then they wanted him, when he became a CPA, they thought that he was going to lose him. They were going to lose him. So they wanted him as a partner. As a partner, we both knew, I knew it's not to his liking or to my liking. Our lifestyle will be different because it was a produce exchange. And he will be obligated, they'll demand of him to do the things that they do too. To at night go to the docks. So we were always together. Even when we were first married, he was coming home for lunch. If we were able to, we sort of lived the distance that he could come. And we were always very, very close. So, and it was not his life. And I knew that his aim was law. And I gave him that support. And it was also very tempting too. It was money. It was, we would have been millionaires because of being partners with that firm. So I said, look, it's not my taste, it's not your taste. I know what you want, and I'm all for it. We wouldn't have so much money, but we will have the life that we like to live. So you go ahead and start law. I'm 100% for it, because he was so good, he thought maybe it's not fair to me either. He could give me everything but the children and I didn't miss anything, even when he was studying or he was working. You made up for everything. First of all, he was a very energetic person. He never lacked any energy. He was a very important position during the day. Such responsibilities. In the evening, he would study, go to school, And he was always energetic. He would not, we'd like to be together. In order to study, to go, even my sisters lived in the same house, to give him a chance to study for the CPA, you have to concentrate and all that. And we go to my sister's house, no. He said, it doesn't matter. You had such a good power of concentration too. You go in the other room and study. You can stay here. So we were joking and laughing, and it didn't matter. Once in a while he'd take a coffee break and he'd come in to join us and joke and all. He was full of pep. So even when he studied, all this, I say that I didn't miss anything. Coming from school, if he had certain courses late in the afternoon, and he would call me from NYU. I have ticket. They had a ticket office. We both liked opera, theater, ballet, and he was so full of energy. He wasn't tired. He'd call me. I have tickets for this and this play. Meet me at school, and then we'd go out. And he loved dancing. So even after theater, he was energetic enough. We'd go to a nightclub. In those days, they had beautiful nightclubs in New York. They don't have them now anymore. And we'd go dancing and go to a nightclub too. And so that's why we could accomplish all that. So I encouraged him to start law, even though we have children already. And then he would still work with the people. And then we had already all the 3 children when he became, when he took his off. My children, you asked me about the children. When they grew, there was a difference in age between my children. There was close to 4 years between George and David, and 11 years between Adelaide and George, 7 years between Adelaide and David. So when Adelaide wasn't born yet, and they were both already in kindergarten, and we wanted them to have a good Hebrew education, we transferred them from the elementary school. David from kindergarten, and George was already in the 4th or 5th grade, and he already started Hebrew in the Hebrew school too. We transferred them to a modern yeshiva, where they studied a half day Hebrew and a half day English. And they did not, and we watched at the same time not to neglect English, not in the very old-fashioned yeshiva where they stressed only the Hebrew learning and not English. They were, all of them, every one of them was very, very bright. Not because I'm a mother, I'm saying it, but they really, in their accomplishments, if I would tell you, they did accomplish everything. Each one of my sons, when they were valedictorian in their school where they came from, the elementary and high school, and they at that time was very, very hard to enter Harvard. Each one of them is a Harvard graduate. One of them went to medical school at Harvard Medical School. My older one did not want to go to Boston because he had already, when you had to enter medical school, he had a girlfriend before he even graduated Harvard. And she was a New York girl, so he wanted to be in a New York school. So he's graduated from New York University Medical School. And my daughter Adelaide, the only one, only Adelaide, she went to Smith College, which was also one of the Ivy League schools. So you can see there were no dummies.
You sound so proud.
What is that?
You sound so proud.
I am. So.
Tell me a little.
Mainly I'm proud because they're good. They're good people. I always used to say, even when they were children, I never had trouble with my children. When they laugh at me, my own children said, "Sure, your children are perfect. They're perfect." So, because I think so. But they really never gave me trouble. In schools, I never had any trouble. And they used to praise them. I'd say, I don't care if they were scholastically so good, but they are good otherwise. They're good people.
Gertrude, tell me a little bit about the correspondence courses that you were taking while you were married.
Yeah, I continued. As I told you, I got out of high school and I want to continue now. Got married very young, so I was not able to attend in daytime, and I continued in Columbia University at that time. Gave courses, correspondence courses. So while I had one child, the other child, I was continuing with those courses. And I must say, although this is a little bit against me, anything that comes to talk about my own praising myself or any qualities, I'm a little shy of saying it. I don't like to talk about myself too much. But I did get they used to grade the papers and send them back to me, and with great praise on especially on my writing. And that's the way I continued. I continue. I'm studious till this day. I continue Hebrew, advanced Hebrew. I still go to school now too, and to lectures, and anything that's very important.
And I understand you're
now,
very active with various organizations.
Yes.
Can you just mention a little bit what you do with the United Jewish Appeal and as an interpreter with Russian refugees?
Well, besides activities, I mean, to benefit the organization, with every organization that I am, I'm very interested in the cause, and Hadassah, Mizrahi, Yeshiva University, Bar Ilan University, and my favorite one is really United Jewish Appeal. I work very hard with them, and Hadassah. But United Jewish Appeal is a more broader scale. It's like an umbrella organization of the whole world. So there I'm on the board. I was honored several times there, and I'm also I speak Russian very well. I must say very well, because I really do. I'm surprised myself. It just came back to me. For years I didn't speak it. I didn't want to speak it. And now there are a lot of Russians. And it just comes back to me naturally, and I speak it very well. So in some, they put me in a capacity as an interpreter, and among other things. Like there was an organization, a branch of the UJA Federation, that I volunteer for a certain time of the year, and a lot of Russians come there to make applications for things, and I'm an interpreter there. Then I went to Israel many times. I also went once on a mission with them, and they have absorption center. Besides going they used to come to. I did it here too in the United States when the Russian Jews came from Russia. I'd go with them to the plane to meet them, and then help them with customs. They didn't know a word of English, to go through customs, and so I helped and then in Israel, they actually wanted to interview Russian Jews about the conditions there, and I had to interview them in English, and then interpret them to the people, the leaders of UJA, in English. So I'm also as an interpreter, among other things that I do there.
At this point, I would like to focus on a very lovely picture of you and Saul, and I would like to state that you have 9 grandchildren now.
The what?
You have 9 grandchildren now, and you recently had a very lovely experience of being at one of your grandchild's wedding.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. As I was saying, too bad my husband did not live to see that, to have that pleasure. I recently married, and he was such a devoted, and as I say, he showered so much love. Those grandchildren, he just loved them so much, each one of them. And recently, I was privileged to live to see one of my granddaughters' wedding. She was married in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
What is her name?
Her name is Andrea. She's David, my son David's oldest child, his daughter. And she and her husband are studying there. They are getting their, this year, their PhD in psychology. They're both the same. So that's why the wedding was there. And there were 4 grandmothers from the other side, myself. And we walked down to the ceremony, the aisle, accompanied by our grandchildren. It was a nice thought of my granddaughter to do. And I was accompanied by 2 of my youngest, each one of them. That one is Adelaide's son, who's a freshman in Brown University now, and Danny, my oldest son's youngest, who's a freshman at Harvard now. And they're 2 handsome young men. And I was accompanied by them to the altar. And I was so proud of them, alongside of me. There's young men alongside of me, and the whole thing, the wedding and everything. But I could not help thinking of my husband. Why he's not there, and how much pleasure he would derive, and how much love he would. I just couldn't. As I was walking with all this joy in my heart, I also had that.
Gertrude, what are you most proud of doing?
What I'm proud of doing? First of all, I must say I'm very grateful for being able to do whatever I want to do, physically, and enjoy it, because you also have to be well enough to enjoy things. Also have to have desires at this age. No youngster. You know my age. So I'm grateful every day that I'm the way I am, and I am interested in things, because I see others my age or even younger that lose interest, and they just dwell on themselves and do nothing. I'm glad that I'm able to be active, and happens. I did have a couple of accidents, and it gave me a little fear, but to do certain things like on ice, to walk on ice and all, which I do. I walk, but with careful. But I'm glad that I overcame certain things, and that I do things. I don't give in, and I travel. I travel even now. And if I have an opportunity that's going to be, I would even travel now. It attracts me. I'm interested in everything. When I read the paper, I'm interested in everything, whether it's politics, whether it's education, the conditions in our government, everything. So I'm grateful for that, because now I see I'm realistic also. I'm an optimist, and I'm grateful for that. At the same time, I always say I think positively, positive, not negative. But at the same time, you can be too naive to be everything positive. I'm a realist too, but it helps me. It helps my state of mind. That I always use that expression. I leave a little open window to let the sunshine come in. I'm hoping I see, it's so bad, this, that. I'm realistic of certain things. I say, what could problems like them so that it will be better? And I can go on. So what I'm mostly proud of is not proud of, but I'm glad of my makeup, and I hope it doesn't change, but it's bound to change. At this age, I don't know what next year will be, but so I go on and I keep being active. I'm not, and I'm very satisfied with that.
Well, you certainly have led a very full and productive life. Do you
Oh,
have... You've led a very full and productive life. Do you have anything else that you would like to comment on at this time?
Well, I give myself a little credit. The way my children are, I must have done something right.
You certainly did.
My husband and myself. I don't say I did it myself. I also very grateful to them that that they followed the example as far as character. I see they do. I don't take the credit to myself. I give a lot of credit to my husband's character, but I'm very, very proud of them.
Thank you, Gertrude Goodman, for giving your family a gift of memories that will be a family treasure for years and years to come.